15 years in federal prison. The words echoed through the Chicago courthouse as I watched Richard, my former fiancé, being led away in handcuffs. 52 years old, and this was the first time I'd ever seen true justice served. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who taught me never to trust anyone had just learned what happens when you betray a woman who survived divorce, buried her mother, and built an empire from scratch. Sarah, my younger sister, squeezed my hand from the row behind. "Thank you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. 6 months ago, she was wearing my mother's vintage wedding dress and kissing the man I was supposed to marry. Today, she was finally free from his web of lies. But how did we get here? How did a successful corporate restructuring consultant like myself end up orchestrating the downfall of the man I once loved? It started on a rainy Tuesday in November, when I returned from Milwaukee to find my life shattered into pieces. Flashback: the discovery. 6 months earlier, the November rain hammered against the windows of my Lincoln Park penthouse as I stepped off the elevator, exhausted from 3 days of meetings with a failing auto parts manufacturer in Milwaukee. At 52, I'd spent the better part of 2 decades helping companies navigate their darkest hours, but nothing had prepared me for what I was about to discover in my own home. The scent hit me the moment I opened my door. Vanilla and bergamot, Sarah's signature perfume, the one she'd worn religiously since college. But Sarah wasn't supposed to be here. She didn't even have a key to my condominium, and more importantly, she was supposed to be helping with final wedding preparations while I was out of town. So, I called out, dropping my leather briefcase by the entrance. The silence that greeted me felt wrong somehow, charged with an energy I couldn't quite identify. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I made my way through the living room, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that normally offered a spectacular view of Lake Michigan, but now showed only the gray November storm. Something was different about my bedroom. The bed was perfectly made, too perfectly, as if someone had tried to erase all evidence of their presence. My jewelry box sat slightly askew on the dresser. Small things, but after 20 years of living alone, you notice when someone has been in your space. My walk-in closet felt different too. Emptier. It took me a moment to process what was missing, and when I did, my knees nearly buckled. My mother's wedding dress was gone. The 1972 Priscilla of Boston gown, with its delicate lace sleeves and seed pearl details, the dress Mom had worn when she married Dad with nothing but love and a $20 bill in her purse. "This dress has seen real love," she'd whispered to me during her final months, her voice weak from chemotherapy, but her eyes still bright with hope. "Someday, Margaret, you'll wear this dress and remember that love is the only inheritance that truly matters." I stood there, staring at the empty space where the dress should have hung, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and torn out a piece of my heart. That dress had survived Mom's battle with cancer, Dad's death 5 years ago, my own bitter divorce in my 30s. It was supposed to be the one constant in my life, the tangible connection to the woman who'd taught me everything about strength and resilience. My phone buzzed. Linda Chen, my law school roommate and closest friend for over 3 decades. Linda never called unless something was catastrophically wrong. "Margaret, thank God you're back. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours." My phone died somewhere over Lake Michigan. "Linda, what's wrong? You sound, sit down. Please just sit down." I sank onto my bed, still staring at the empty closet. "Linda, you're scaring me. Your sister and Richard got married yesterday. At the Chicago Botanic Garden. It's all over social media. They, Margaret, they used your mother's dress." The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the hardwood floor. Through the rain-streaked windows, Chicago's skyline blurred into watercolor memories. The Willis Tower, the John Hancock Building, the constellation of lights that had always made me feel safe and grounded. Suddenly everything looked foreign, hostile. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. But even as I tried to deny it, the pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Richard's insistence that I take this Milwaukee trip despite our wedding being only 2 weeks away. Sarah's sudden interest in my wedding plans. Her excessive enthusiasm about helping while I was gone. The way they'd both encouraged me to extend my stay when the client meetings ran long. They'd planned this. Both of them. At the apartment, the full reality. Linda arrived within 30 minutes, soaked from the rain and carrying a bottle of wine like a weapon. She took one look at my face and immediately poured two large glasses. "Show me," I said quietly. "Margaret, maybe you should wait until show me. Now." With trembling fingers, I forced myself to open Instagram. The first photo hit me like a physical blow. Sarah, radiant in my mother's vintage lace, standing in the rose garden at the Chicago Botanic Garden. Her arms were wrapped around Richard, my Richard, both of them beaming at the camera with the kind of joy that should have been mine. The caption under Sarah's post read, "When you know it's meant to be." Sorry, Maggie. Sometimes love can't wait. Life is too short to ignore true love when it finds you. Thank you to everyone who helped make this day perfect. Hash soulmates, hash unexpected love, hash family first, hash Chicago wedding, family first. The irony was suffocating. I scrolled through dozens more photos. Sarah cutting a cake with Richard. Sarah dancing with Richard to what should have been our song. Sarah tossing my mother's bouquet, the vintage pearl and lace design I'd spent months perfecting with the florist, to a crowd of squealing friends. "There are over 300 photos," Linda said softly. "Half of Chicago's social scene was there, including some of your business contacts." The humiliation was almost worse than the betrayal. Not only had they stolen my life, they'd made it a public spectacle. By now, everyone in my professional circle would know. Margaret Pierce, the woman who could save failing companies but couldn't save her own relationship. I remember when Sarah first met Richard at my office Christmas party last year. She'd just finalized her divorce from Tom, struggling to make ends meet with two teenagers and no real career to fall back on. She'd been drinking too much that night, her laughter too loud, her desperation too obvious. "He seems really successful," she'd whispered to me, watching Richard charm the room with stories of his family's manufacturing empire. "You're so lucky, Maggie. You always land on your feet." Lucky. If she only knew the truth behind my luck. The 18-hour days building my consulting practice from nothing. The relationships I'd sacrificed to reach where I was today. The nights I'd held Mom's hand through chemotherapy while Sarah was too overwhelmed with the divorce to visit. "There's more," Linda said grimly, pulling up Facebook on her phone. "Look at this." Richard's post was even worse. A formal announcement written in the third person, as if it were a press release. Richard Harris III and Sarah Pierce Morrison are thrilled to announce their marriage on November 15, 2024. The intimate ceremony was attended by family and close friends at the Chicago Botanic Garden. The couple will honeymoon in Napa Valley before returning to Chicago to begin their new life together. Both families are overjoyed at this union of two souls meant to be together. Two souls meant to be together. I'd been with Richard for 3 years. 3 years of planning our future, supporting his struggling business, believing in his vision for Harris Industries. And apparently, I'd been nothing more than a placeholder until he found someone more suitable. My laptop chimed with an incoming email notification. David Thornton, my business partner and the closest thing I had to family after Sarah. The subject line read, "Harris Industries, final acquisition papers, action required." Harris Industries. Richard's great-grandfather's company, the third-generation manufacturing business that Richard had been systematically running into the ground for the past 2 years. The company I'd been secretly acquiring through shell corporations for the past 6 months, originally as a wedding gift, a way to help save Richard's family legacy without damaging his pride. How naive I'd been. How perfectly, pathetically naive. But as I stared at that email, something cold and calculating settled in my chest. Something my ex-husband used to call my ice queen mode, the state of mind that had helped me rebuild myself after a divorce, that had made me one of the most feared corporate restructuring consultants in the Midwest. Richard and Sarah thought they'd outmaneuvered me. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The plan forms. I clicked open the acquisition documents. Page after page of legal text, stock transfers, and financial projections. 6 months of careful maneuvering, of building shell companies and private equity partnerships, all leading to this moment. One signature, and I'd own controlling interest in Harris Industries. One signature, and I control Richard's entire world. Mom used to say, Margaret, sweetie, you have your grandmother's mind for business and your grandfather's iron will. Use them both, but use them wisely. Grandpa had built a small empire from a single Chicago deli, surviving the Depression through sheer determination and strategic thinking. Grandma had kept the books and made the tough decisions that kept the family fed. I'd inherited both their strengths, and Richard was about to learn exactly how ironclad my resolve could be. My phone rang. Richard. I stared at his name on the screen, remembering all the nights he'd called to tell me about his day, his voice warm with affection. Now that same name made my stomach turn. Margaret, baby, I can explain. I hung up and turned off my phone. There was nothing he could say that would change what I'd seen, nothing that could justify what they'd done. But more importantly, I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out exactly how I was going to destroy them both. Margaret, Linda said carefully, I know that look. What are you thinking? I signed the acquisition papers with a flourish, my signature bold and decisive across the bottom of each page. I'm thinking, I said, reaching for my laptop to scan and send the documents, that Richard is about to learn what happens when you betray someone who specializes in hostile takeovers. And Sarah? I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Sarah was a different problem. Sarah was family, no matter how deeply she'd hurt me. But she was also an adult who'd made her choice, and choices had consequences. Sarah, I said finally, is about to learn what happens when you steal from someone who's never forgotten where she came from. The investigation begins. Over the next 3 days, I did what I did best. I gathered intelligence. I called in favors from forensic accountants, private investigators, and business contacts across the Midwest. What I found made my blood run cold. Richard wasn't just a failing businessman. He was a serial fraud artist. Michael Chen, no relation to Linda, despite the shared surname, was a forensic accountant I'd worked with on several restructuring deals. He'd been quietly investigating Harris Industries for months, originally hired by the board of directors to assess the company's financial health before a potential merger. Margaret, he said over coffee at the Palmer House, his usually steady voice shaking slightly. I need to show you something, but I need your word that this stays confidential until I finish my report. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, and what looked like copies of signed documents. This man has done this before. 3 other women over the past 5 years. Same pattern every time. Court them, gain their trust, get access to their financial resources, then disappear when the money runs out or they get too close to the truth. I flipped through the documents, my hands growing steadier with each page. Tell me everything. Jennifer Walsh, 2019. Real estate developer in Minneapolis. Richard convinced her to invest in a joint venture that was actually a front for siphoning money from Harris Industries. When she started asking questions, he claimed she was unstable and took out a restraining order. Lisa Martinez, 2021. Pharmaceutical executive in Milwaukee. Similar story, but this time he actually married her. The marriage lasted 6 months, just long enough to gain access to her investment portfolio. When she filed for divorce, she discovered he'd transferred most of her assets to offshore accounts. And then there's Amanda Foster, 2022. Tech entrepreneur from Madison. She was smart enough to keep her finances separate, so Richard tried a different approach. He seduced her business partner and convinced the partner to freeze Amanda out of her own company. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't stop reading. Each case was meticulously documented, each woman's story a variation on the same devastating theme. How did you find all this? I asked. Amanda Foster hired me after her business collapsed. She suspected Richard but couldn't prove it. I've been building this case for 2 years, following the money trail across 4 states. The pattern is always the same. Identify a successful woman with assets, gain her trust, exploit her resources, then move on to the next target. I thought about Sarah's financial situation, the messy divorce, the struggling kids, the mounting bills. She would have been perfect prey for someone like Richard. There's something else, Michael continued. Your sister isn't just a victim. Based on what I found, Richard has been using her name to open accounts and make investments. If this comes to light during my investigation, she could be charged as an accessory. The folder slipped from my hands. What are you saying? I'm saying that in 3 weeks, I'm presenting my findings to the Harris Industries Board of Directors and the FBI. Your sister's name is all over the financial documents. Unless someone intervenes, she's going to go down with him. The counterattack. That night, I sat in my study surrounded by legal documents, financial reports, and the harsh truth about the man I'd almost married. Linda had stayed late, helping me sort through the evidence and plan our next moves. So, what's the strategy? She asked, refilling our wine glasses. Phase 1. I complete the acquisition of Harris Industries. As majority shareholder, I'll have legal standing to review all company finances and initiate internal investigations. Phase 2. I use that access to build an airtight case against Richard, making sure the evidence clearly shows that Sarah was manipulated rather than complicit. And Phase 3. I smiled, and Linda actually shivered. Phase 3 is where we make sure Richard never hurts another woman again. The next morning, I called David Thornton to finalize the Harris Industries acquisition. By noon, I owned 51% of the company Richard's great-grandfather had built from nothing. By evening, I'd scheduled an emergency board meeting for the following Monday. But first, I had a dinner party to crash. 3 days later, LeBlanc Restaurant, LeBlanc had been Richard's choice for our monthly anniversary dinners. He'd always insisted on the corner table by the windows, where he could see and be seen by Chicago's business elite. The irony of him choosing this place for his post-wedding celebration wasn't lost on me. I'd spent an hour getting ready, choosing my outfit with the same strategic precision I used for hostile takeover meetings. Black Armani suit, simple pearl necklace, mom's pearls, the ones she'd worn to every important occasion. Professional, elegant, and utterly devastating. Table for one, I announced to the maitre d', my voice carrying clearly across the hushed dining room. Every head turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The effect was exactly what I'd hoped for. This was Richard's world, these were his people, and I just walked into their sanctuary looking like I owned the place. Which, considering my recent acquisition, wasn't far from the truth. There they were, holding court at the large round table in the center of the room. Sarah in a designer dress she definitely couldn't afford, Richard looking distinctly uncomfortable in his best suit. Their friends clustered around them like a protective wall, but I could see the cracks already forming as whispers spread through the restaurant. Margaret, Sarah gasped, standing so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. What are you doing here? I accepted the menu from the hovering waiter with a gracious smile. Having dinner, of course. The lamb is excellent here. Richard and I used to order it every November 15th. Oh wait, I paused, tapping my temple with one manicured finger. That's not our anniversary anymore, is it? How silly of me. The silence at their table was deafening. Richard's face had gone from red to white in a matter of seconds, and several of their guests were clearly calculating the fastest route to the exit. Congratulations, by the way, I continued, settling into my table within perfect earshot of theirs. The photos were absolutely beautiful. Mom's dress looked lovely on you, Sarah. She would have been so surprised to see it used that way. The truth was, I could imagine exactly what Mom would have said about this situation. She'd have been heartbroken about the betrayal, furious about the dress, but ultimately focused on protecting her daughters, both of them. Margaret, I could hear her voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside me. Remember that anger is just hurt wearing a disguise. Figure out what's really been hurt, and you'll know how to heal it. One of Richard's business associates, I recognized him as James Morrison from the Manufacturing Association, cleared his throat awkwardly. Margaret, why don't you join us? We're celebrating. That's so kind, I replied, raising the glass of champagne that had just appeared at my table. But I wouldn't want to impose. Besides, I have some work to review before Monday's big announcement. Richard's head snapped up. What announcement? Oh, you'll find out soon enough. The board meeting invitation went out this afternoon, didn't it? I'm sure it'll be quite illuminating. A waiter appeared with a bottle of Dom Perignon. Compliments of the house, Miss Pierce, he said, clearly having recognized me. Congratulations on your recent business success. I raised my glass in Richard's direction. To new beginnings and old friends. May we all get exactly what we deserve. The toast hung in the air like a threat. Sarah suddenly stood up, her face pale. We need to talk. Now. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin with desperate strength. Of course, darling. Let's have a proper sister chat. The powder room confrontation. The ladies' room at LeBlanc was all marble and gold fixtures, the kind of opulent space where Chicago's elite women had been having difficult conversations for decades. Sarah spun to face me the moment the door closed, tears already streaming down her cheeks. What are you doing, Maggie? What is this about? I checked my lipstick in the mirror, taking my time with the response. The woman staring back at me looked nothing like the naive fool who trusted her sister and fiancé. This woman looked dangerous. I'm having dinner, Sarah. The lamb really is excellent here. You should try it sometime when you can afford it. Stop it. Her voice cracked with desperation. Stop acting like this doesn't hurt you. I know you, Ellie. You're planning something, and it's scaring me. I turned to face her fully, and she actually took a step back. You're right. You do know me. So you know exactly what happens to people who betray me. The question is, do you know what happens to people who steal from me? We didn't steal anything, my dress, my fiancé, my dignity, my mother's memory. Each word was delivered like a slap. Should I go on? Sarah's face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We fell in love. We couldn't help it. Couldn't help stealing mom's dress. Couldn't help planning your wedding while I was out of town. Couldn't help making it a public spectacle. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Please, Sarah, at least have the decency to be honest about your choices. The bathroom door opened and another woman walked in, took one look at us, and quickly walked back out. What's this announcement everyone's talking about? Sarah demanded. You'll find out Monday. Bring your best smile. There will be photographers. Maggie, please. I'm your sister. Or, you are my sister. Sisters don't destroy each other for money. Money? She looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? For a moment, looking at her tear-streaked face and obvious bewilderment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Ask Richard about Harris Industries' quarterly reports, Sarah. Ask him about the other women. Ask him why he was so interested in marrying into families with financial resources. Other women? What other women? A sharp knock interrupted us. Sarah? Richard's voice carried through the door, tight with barely controlled panic. Is everything okay in there? I opened the door, coming face to face with the man I'd once planned to spend my life with. Up close, I could see the stress lines around his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly as he reached for Sarah. Everything's fine, Richard. We're just having a little sister chat. I paused, letting my gaze travel over his expensive suit, his perfectly styled hair, the gold watch I'd given him for his birthday. By the way, how's the company doing? I heard there were some concerning quarterly reports. He paled visibly. How did you? I've always paid more attention to business than you gave me credit for. I patted his cheek as I brushed past him, my touch light but somehow threatening. See you Monday, Richard. Don't be late. Back at the table, I returned to my table to find my lamb perfectly prepared and a small crowd of onlookers pretending not to stare. Across the restaurant, I could see Richard and Sarah in heated discussion, their celebration thoroughly disrupted. Their friends were making polite excuses and departing in pairs, leaving the happy couple increasingly isolated. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw what happened at LeBlanc. We need to talk about Richard Harris. Meet me tomorrow, 10 a.m. Capital Coffee. I was about to delete it when another message came through. I have information you'll want to hear before Monday's board meeting. Ask for Michael. Michael Chen, the forensic accountant. Word traveled fast in Chicago's business circles. I finished my meal slowly, savoring each bite as Richard and Sarah's world disintegrated around them. As I stood to leave, I dropped my business card on their table. You might need this, I told Richard, loud enough for the remaining diners to hear. It's my lawyer's number for when you figure out what's coming. Outside, the November air was sharp against my skin, carrying the promise of winter. My phone buzzed again with that unknown number. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't be late. You'll want to hear this. I saved the number under Michael Forensic and flagged down a taxi. The night had gone exactly according to plan, but tomorrow promised to be even more interesting. After all, in business and revenge, information is everything. The next morning, Capital Coffee was buzzing with the usual mix of business meetings and first dates when I arrived at 9:55 a.m. Michael Chen was easy to spot, athletic build, sharp features, the kind of precise appearance that came from years of analyzing numbers and catching discrepancies. You must be Michael, I said, sliding into the seat across from him. And you're the woman who's about to take down Richard Harris. He pushed a coffee toward me. Black, 2 sugars. Your usual, according to the barista. I raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned that you know my coffee order? I make it my business to know things. He slid a thick folder across the table. Like how Richard's been embezzling from his family's company for the past 18 months. I opened the folder, scanning documents filled with transaction records, bank statements, and what appeared to be forged authorizations. How did you get these? I'm the external auditor hired by the Harris Industries board last month. They wanted an independent assessment before approving any new investments or partnerships. What I found was concerning. Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. But here's what's really interesting. The money isn't in Richard's personal accounts. It's been funneled into accounts under your sister's name. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What? Richard's been systematically transferring company funds into accounts he opened using Sarah's identity. Based on the documentation, she probably doesn't even know they exist. He tapped one of the bank statements. Your acquisition isn't just going to expose his mismanagement, it's going to uncover massive fraud. The implications hit me like a physical blow. You're saying my sister could be charged as an accessory. Unless someone intervenes, yes. The accounts are in her name, with her social security number. Without evidence that she was coerced or manipulated, the authorities will assume she was complicit. My phone buzzed. Sarah, calling for the dozenth time since last night. I declined it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Michael's expression hardened. Because Richard did the same thing to my sister 3 years ago. Different company, same scheme. She lost everything when it came crashing down. Her business, her savings, her reputation. She still hasn't recovered. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be strategic. I've been building a case against him for 2 years, following the money trail across 4 states. He's got a pattern, and your sister is just his latest victim. What do you need from me? Access. As majority shareholder of Harris Industries, you'll have legal standing to review all company finances and authorize internal investigations. With your backing, I can build an airtight case that clearly shows Sarah was manipulated rather than complicit. The cafe door chimed, and I glanced up to see Leah Patterson, Sarah's best friend and maid of honor, walking in. She spotted me immediately and froze. Don't look now, I told Michael, but we're about to have company. Margaret. Leah hurried over, her face flushed with anxiety. I've been trying to reach you. Sarah's a mess. She found something weird in her mail yesterday, bank statements for accounts she says she never opened. When did these arrive? Michael interrupted, pulling out a notebook. Leah looked between us suspiciously. Who are you? Someone who's trying to help your friend, I said. When did the statements arrive, Leah? Yesterday afternoon, after that whole scene at LeBlanc. Sarah was hysterical, calling Richard, demanding explanations. He told her it was just a mistake, some kind of identity theft thing, but she didn't believe him, Michael finished. She's scared. Really scared. She keeps saying that something's not right, that Richard's been acting strange since the wedding. I gathered the documents Michael had shown me, sliding them back into the folder. Tell Sarah to keep those statements somewhere safe. And tell her not to sign anything Richard gives her. Anything at all. Margaret, you're scaring me. What's going on? What's going on? I said, standing up. Is that your friend is in serious trouble, and I'm the only one who can help her. Outside Capital Coffee, Michael walked with me to the curb, where my Uber was already waiting. The morning sun was harsh and bright, reflecting off the glass facades of the surrounding buildings. Your sister's lucky, he said. Most of Richard's victims don't find out until it's too late. She's not lucky, I corrected. She's just got me. I stopped walking and turned to face him. I need everything you have on his previous schemes. Every document, every victim statement, every piece of evidence. Already compiled. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket. But be careful. He gets dangerous when cornered. The restraining order against Jennifer Walsh wasn't just for show. He actually threatened her when she started asking questions. So do I. I took the USB drive, feeling its weight like a weapon in my palm. He has no idea what he's unleashed. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Got an interesting call from the board this morning. What have you done? I showed the message to Michael, who actually smiled. Looks like he's starting to piece it together, he observed. Good. I typed back. Looking forward to discussing it at Monday's meeting. You're enjoying this, Michael noted, a hint of admiration in his voice. Wouldn't you? Fair point. He handed me his business card. Call me if you need anything else. And Margaret? He caught my eye. Make it hurt. I watched him disappear into the crowd, then called David Thornton. David, we need to move up the timeline. How fast can you get the Harris Industries board together for an emergency meeting? They're already asking questions, came his response. Richard's been making frantic calls all morning, trying to figure out who's behind the acquisition. Perfect. Send invitations for this afternoon. 3 o'clock. And David, make sure Sarah gets an official invitation as well. She's going to want to hear this. Are you sure about this, Margaret? Once we pull this trigger, there's no going back. I looked up at the Chicago skyline, at the city that had made me who I was, strong, successful, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Preparing for war, I spent the rest of the morning at Linda's law office, reviewing every piece of evidence Michael had provided and planning our legal strategy. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd imagined. Jesus, Margaret, Linda said, flipping through bank statements, he's stolen over $2 million from his own family's company. And that's just what we can prove. What about Sarah's exposure? If we can establish a pattern of coercion and identity theft, we can probably keep her out of prison. But she's definitely going to face charges unless we can prove she was completely unaware of what was happening. The USB drive Michael had given me contained a treasure trove of information. Detailed financial records, victim statements, even recorded conversations from his previous schemes. The man was a predator, and we had everything we needed to destroy him. But first, I had to save my sister. The emergency board meeting. The Harris Industries boardroom had been the site of 3 generations of family meetings, corporate decisions that had shaped the Chicago manufacturing landscape for nearly a century. Today, it would witness the fall of the Harris dynasty. I arrived early to watch them file in. Richard's father, William Harris Sr., looking grave and confused. His uncle Thomas, checking his phone nervously. Board members I'd researched extensively over the past months, all wearing expressions of concern and curiosity. Sarah arrived last, clutching her purse like a shield. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, her usually perfect makeup smudged. When she saw me at the head of the conference table, her face went even paler. What is this? Richard demanded when he burst through the doors 5 minutes late. Margaret, you can't be here. Actually, David Thornton stepped forward, briefcase in hand. Ms. Pierce is now the majority shareholder of Harris Industries. She has every right to be here. The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations. William Harris Sr. stood up slowly, his weathered hands gripping the back of his chair. What did you just say? Perhaps we should begin, I suggested, taking my seat at the head of the table where Richard's grandfather had once presided. We have a lot to discuss. Michael Chen entered quietly, wheeling in a cart loaded with documents and a laptop. Richard's face went from red to white in seconds. Before we start, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room, I should mention that everything said here is being recorded. Legal requirement, you understand, given the nature of what we're about to discuss. This is ridiculous. Richard sputtered. You can't just waltz in here and, sit down, son. William Harris's voice cut through his grandson's protest like a blade. Let's hear what she has to say. I nodded to Michael, who connected his laptop to the room's projection system. Immediately, bank statements filled the large screen, transaction records highlighted in angry red. Over the past 18 months, Michael began, his voice professionally neutral. Approximately $2.3 million has been systematically diverted from Harris Industries' operating accounts into private holdings. Richard's father leaned forward, squinting at the screen. That's impossible. Our internal audits showed. Were falsified, Michael finished. I'm afraid the real numbers tell a very different story. I watched Sarah as the evidence mounted. Her hands shook as she recognized account numbers, the same ones from the mysterious bank statements she'd received yesterday. These accounts, Michael continued, changing slides to show signature cards and authorization forms, were opened under the name of Sarah Pierce Morrison, using her social security number and forged identification documents. All eyes turned to my sister. I didn't. She started, her voice barely a whisper. I never opened those accounts. Richard told me they were investment accounts for our future, but I never signed anything. Her voice trailed off as she realized what she'd just admitted. Richard had been using her identity for months, and she'd been too trusting or too desperate to ask the right questions. Did you sign anything? I asked her gently. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Last week. Some papers Richard said were for setting up our joint finances after the wedding. He said it was all standard stuff. You. Richard snarled, turning on me with such fury that two security guards stepped forward. You planned this. You orchestrated all of this. No, Richard, I said, my voice calm and deadly. You planned this. You've been planning it for months, maybe longer. I just exposed it. I turned to address the board directly. Gentlemen, I have a proposal. Harris Industries needs new leadership, and it needs it now. I'm offering to step in as CEO, effective immediately, with a complete restructuring of management and a full financial audit. This is a family company. William Harris protested, though his voice lacked conviction. And it will remain one, I assured him. You'll keep your position as chairman, and the Harris name will stay on the building. But your grandson needs to step down, and we need to implement immediate safeguards to prevent this from happening again. Or what? Thomas Harris demanded. I let the question hang in the air for a moment before responding. Or these documents go to the FBI, the SEC, and every major business publication in the Midwest. Your choice. The room fell silent except for Sarah's quiet sobbing and the hum of the projection system. There's more, Michael added, changing slides again. Similar patterns in Mr. Harris's previous relationships. 3 other women, 3 other companies, same basic scheme. Richard lunged across the table toward Michael, but the security guards were ready. They restrained him as he struggled, his composure completely shattered. You're finished. He spat at me. Both of you. He looked wildly at Sarah, then back at me. All of you. I'll make sure you all go down with me. No, Richard, I corrected him, standing up to face him directly. You're finished. Guards, please escort Mr. Harris out. The police are waiting in the lobby. As they dragged him away, still screaming threats and accusations, his father slowly stood up. I moved to accept Ms. Pierce's proposal, William Harris said, his voice heavy with years of disappointment and regret. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, the boardroom emptied quickly after that, leaving only Sarah, Michael, and me surrounded by scattered documents and the wreckage of a family business nearly destroyed by greed. Sarah approached me hesitantly, her designer dress wrinkled and her makeup completely ruined. Did you know? She asked quietly. About the accounts, about what he was doing. Not until yesterday, I admitted, handing her Linda's business card. She's the best fraud attorney in the city. Call her. Today. Why are you helping me? The question hung between us like a bridge we might or might not cross. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the scared little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Because you're my sister, I said finally. And because you're another one of his victims. I gathered my papers, preparing to leave. But Sarah, we're not okay. Not yet. I know. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm so sorry, Maggie. About everything. About the dress, about Richard, about being so stupid. Sorry doesn't fix it, I said, more gently than I felt. But this might be a start. Michael waited for me in the hallway, looking impressed despite himself. That went better than expected, he said. The hard part's just beginning. I checked my phone to find dozens of missed calls from reporters, business contacts, and Richard's family. Now comes the real work, rebuilding this company and making sure he never hurts anyone else. Still planning to attend the spring gala? He asked. The business community will be watching to see how you handle your first public appearance as CEO. Wouldn't miss it. I smiled. Want to be my date? He raised an eyebrow. Mixing business with pleasure? Maybe I just want someone trustworthy by my side for once. In that case, he offered his arm. Let's get coffee and you can tell me what you're really planning for the restructuring. As we walked toward the elevators, I saw Richard being led into a police car through the lobby windows. Justice, served with a side of careful planning and unexpected allies. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. Just saw the news. You're not going to believe what else I found in Richard's background check. Save it for tomorrow, I texted back. Today's been eventful enough. Looking up at Michael, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Maybe revenge wasn't just about destruction. Maybe it could also be about rebuilding something better from the ashes. 6 weeks later, the Spring Gala. The Chicago Art Institute's Spring Gala sparkled with crystal and champagne, but all eyes were on me as I descended the marble staircase in a midnight blue Alexander McQueen gown. The business world's elite had gathered to witness what the press was calling the most dramatic corporate takeover in Chicago history. Michael waited at the bottom of the stairs, looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo. What had started as a professional relationship had slowly, carefully, blossomed into something deeper, something built on mutual respect and shared values rather than convenience or desperation. Ready to make history? He whispered, taking my arm. Born ready. Camera flashes erupted as we made our entrance. Chicago's business community watched with fascination as the woman who'd exposed one of the city's most prominent fraud cases took her victory lap. Reporters pressed forward, but David Thornton and his PR team efficiently managed the crowd. Ms. Pierce. A journalist called out. How does it feel to have saved Harris Industries? This isn't about saving one company, I replied, pausing for the cameras. It's about protecting workers, investors, and the integrity of Chicago business. That's what real leadership looks like. Across the room, I spotted William Harris standing with several board members, his expression unreadable. Our eyes met briefly, and he nodded, a small gesture of respect that meant more than any public acclaim. Where's Sarah? Michael asked, scanning the crowd. Here. My sister emerged from behind a group of museum patrons, looking elegant in a simple black dress, one she'd bought with her first paycheck from her new job at a nonprofit organization for fraud victims. The past 6 weeks had changed her dramatically. The desperate, grasping woman who'd stolen my dress was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to finally understand the weight of her choices. The police interviewed me again this morning, she said quietly. They're expanding the investigation to include Richard's activities in 3 other states. There might be more victims than we thought. Good, I said, handing her a glass of champagne. Stay close. You'll want to hear this announcement. The room gradually hushed as David took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. We have several important announcements regarding the future of Harris Industries and corporate responsibility in Chicago. I felt Sarah tense beside me. Despite everything that had happened, she still worried about me, about what this public exposure might cost me personally and professionally. Please welcome the new CEO of Harris Industries, Ms. Margaret Pierce. The applause was thunderous as I took the stage. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning, and I could see the faces of Chicago's power brokers hanging on my every word. Thank you, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the ornate ballroom. 6 weeks ago, Harris Industries was on the verge of collapse due to fraud and mismanagement. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that we've not only stabilized the company, but positioned it for unprecedented growth. I paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But our success isn't just measured in stock prices or quarterly reports. As my first major initiative as CEO, I'm announcing the establishment of the Harris Industries Victim Recovery Fund, a $20 million commitment to helping those who've been harmed by corporate fraud. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't the typical corporate announcement they'd expected. To those who lost their savings, their businesses, their trust in the system, we see you. We believe you. And we will make this right. Sarah gasped beside me, tears streaming down her face. In the audience, I spotted several women I now knew were Richard's previous victims, including Michael's sister Jennifer. They were crying too, but these were tears of relief and validation. Michael stepped forward, presenting additional documents to the gathered press. Tomorrow's headlines would tell the complete story of Richard's fraud ring and the systematic way he destroyed lives across the Midwest. As I concluded my speech, the ballroom doors burst open. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought Richard had somehow made bail and come to disrupt the event. Instead, it was Leah Patterson, looking frantic and carrying what appeared to be a large manila envelope. She rushed to Sarah, whispering something that made my sister's face go pale. "What's wrong?" I asked, stepping down from the stage. "Richard made bail." Sarah's voice shook. "He's been calling everyone, threatening people, claiming he has evidence that will clear his name and implicate both of us." On cue, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker. "Margaret, you think you're so smart, but you have no idea what's coming. I have documents that prove you orchestrated this entire scheme. You and your pathetic sister are going down. Enjoy your little party. It's the last one you'll ever attend as a free woman." The threat hung in the air like poison. Several guests had overheard and were backing away nervously. Michael stepped between me and the crowd. "Everyone needs to stay calm. Security is handling this." But Richard wasn't done. Another call came through, this time to Sarah's phone. She answered it without thinking, and Richard's voice filled the immediate area around us. "Sarah, baby, you need to listen to me. Margaret has been using you this whole time. She planned everything, the acquisition, the investigation, even our wedding. She manipulated both of us." Sarah looked at me with confusion and fear. "Richard, that's not true. Check your email. I sent you proof. Bank records showing Margaret funded shell companies months before we even met. She's been planning this for over a year." I felt the crowd's attention shift, doubt creeping into their expressions. Richard was trying to turn the narrative, to make me the villain of my own story. But I'd been preparing for this moment. "Actually, Richard," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "let's talk about what you sent Sarah." I pulled out my phone and connected it to the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear is a recording made yesterday by the FBI. Mr. Harris doesn't know about it yet." Richard's voice filled the ballroom, but this wasn't the desperate, accusatory tone from moments before. This was Richard bragging to someone he thought was a fellow criminal. So stupid, both of them. "Margaret thinks she's so smart with her corporate takeover, but she has no idea I've been setting her up for months." I made sure Sarah's name was on everything, every account, every transaction. "When this comes crashing down, they'll both go to prison and I'll disappear with what's left of the money." The recording continued for several more minutes, detailing Richard's complete plan to frame both Sarah and me for his crimes. By the time it ended, the ballroom was silent except for the soft whir of the air conditioning. I looked out at the assembled crowd, reporters, business leaders, social figures who'd known Richard for years. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said quietly, "that was recorded yesterday afternoon when Mr. Harris thought he was speaking to a potential partner in money laundering. What you just heard is a man who spent months planning to destroy his fiancée and her sister to cover up his own crimes. The room erupted. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashed, and questions flew from every direction. But I only had eyes for Sarah, who was staring at me with something approaching awe. You knew, she whispered. You knew he would try to frame us. I suspected. That's why I had the FBI monitor his calls after his arrest. How long have you known about all of this? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and made a decision that would define our relationship going forward. I suspected Richard was using you from the beginning, but I didn't know how deep it went until Michael showed me the evidence. Everything I did was to protect you as much as to stop him. Security guards appeared at the ballroom entrance. Ms. Pierce? We have Mr. Harris in custody. He was attempting to break into the building through the service entrance. Press charges, I said firmly. All of them. As they led Richard away for the second time, he caught sight of me through the crowd. This isn't over, he screamed. You think you've won, but I'll destroy you if it's the last thing I do. Actually, I called back, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. It is over. And you already tried to destroy me. Look how that worked out. The assembled crowd actually applauded. The aftermath. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of interviews, congratulations, and carefully managed media appearances. Sarah stayed close to my side, fielding questions about her own role in uncovering Richard's fraud with a grace I hadn't seen from her in years. Near midnight, as the gala wound down, Michael and I found ourselves alone on the museum's terrace, looking out over Lake Michigan. So, he said, loosening his bow tie, how does it feel to have completely destroyed your ex-fiancé's life? I considered the question seriously. I thought it would feel better than this. Regrets? Not about stopping him, but about Sarah, about the dress, about how long it took me to see who he really was. I paused, watching the moonlight dance on the water. I spent so much energy on revenge that I almost forgot what I was really fighting for, which was protection, justice, making sure he never hurt anyone else. I turned to face Michael, and maybe proving to myself that I'm not the naive woman who almost married a sociopath. He smiled, reaching out to touch my cheek. Trust me, there's nothing naive about what you accomplished. You didn't just expose a fraud, you saved dozens of potential victims and rebuilt a company from the ground up. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Thank you for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm going to spend however long it takes earning it back. I showed the message to Michael. Think she means it. I think she's finally understanding what she almost lost. 3 months later, the resolution. The courtroom was packed for Richard's sentencing hearing. I sat in the front row between Michael and Linda, watching as the judge reviewed the extensive evidence of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy that our investigation had uncovered. Mr. Harris, the judge began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You have been found guilty of multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The evidence shows a pattern of deliberate manipulation and financial abuse spanning 5 years and affecting at least 12 victims across 4 states. Sarah squeezed my hand from the row behind us. She testified against Richard earlier in the week, her voice steady and clear as she described how he'd manipulated her desperation to gain access to my finances and resources. The impact on your victims has been devastating, the judge continued. You've destroyed businesses, depleted life savings, and shattered the trust of women who believed they'd found love and partnership. Richard stood in his orange jumpsuit, his hands shackled, looking nothing like the confident businessman who'd once charmed Chicago's social circles. Taking into account the severity and repeated nature of these crimes, the court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Additionally, you are ordered to make full restitution to all victims, totaling $3.2 million. The gavel fell with finality. Richard was led away without looking back, disappearing through the side door to begin serving his sentence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us with questions about justice, corporate responsibility, and what this case meant for other fraud victims. I answered them professionally, but my attention was focused on the group of women standing together near the courthouse steps, Richard's victims. finally seeing their day in court. Jennifer Chen, Michael's sister, approached us with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing us, for fighting for us, for making sure he can't do this to anyone else." "Thank you for having the courage to come forward," I replied. "None of this would have been possible without your testimony." 6 months later, full circle. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I reviewed Harris Industries' quarterly reports. The numbers were better than I dared hope. We were not only profitable again, but actively growing, with new contracts coming in from companies that respected our commitment to transparency and ethical business practices. Sarah knocked on my door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking more confident than I'd seen her since we were teenagers. "The Victim Advocacy Program just got approval for federal funding," she announced, settling into the chair across from my desk. "We'll be able to help twice as many people next year." "That's wonderful. How are you feeling about it?" She considered the question seriously. "Useful. Like I'm finally doing something that matters instead of just existing." Over the past months, Sarah had thrown herself into her work with the kind of dedication I remembered from our childhood. She'd returned to school to get certified in victim advocacy, volunteered at legal aid clinics, and become a powerful voice for fraud prevention education. "There's something else," she said, pulling a familiar white garment bag from behind her chair. "My mother's wedding dress." Sarah had had it professionally restored after the damage from her brief marriage to Richard. Every seed pearl had been carefully reattached, every lace panel meticulously repaired. "I want you to have this back," she said quietly. "I know it can't undo what I did. But keep it," I interrupted. "For Emma." Sarah's daughter was 16 now, already talking about college and career plans with the kind of determination that reminded me of myself at that age. "Are you sure? Mom always said the dress would know when it was needed. Maybe it's time for the next generation." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I did to you." "Maybe that's not the point," I said gently. "Maybe the point is what we do moving forward." A knock on my door interrupted us. Michael peeked in, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the kind of smile that had become increasingly common in our relationship. "Sorry to interrupt, but I have news. The FBI just arrested Richard's former business partner in Milwaukee. Turns out he was running a similar scheme with construction companies." "How many victims?" "At least 20. They're expecting more to come forward now that word is getting out." I felt a familiar surge of anger at the scope of Richard's network, but it was tempered by satisfaction at seeing justice continue to unfold. "There's something else," Michael continued, his expression shifting to something more personal. "I was wondering if you might want to have dinner tonight. There's something I want to discuss with you." Sarah stood up quickly, recognizing the shift in atmosphere. "I should get back to work. Thank you again, Maggie, for everything." After she left, Michael closed the door and approached my desk with a kind of nervous energy I'd never seen from him before. "Margaret," he began, then stopped, running his hand through his hair. "We've been through a lot together this past year." "We have. And I know your last relationship ended in spectacular disaster, so the timing might be terrible. But—" I stood up and kissed him, cutting off his rambling explanation. "When we broke apart," he looked dazed. "Was that a yes?" he asked. "That was ask me the question properly and find out." He laughed, reaching into his jacket pocket. "Margaret Pierce, you are the strongest, smartest, most terrifying woman I've ever met. You've rebuilt a company, exposed a criminal network, and somehow managed to save your relationship with your sister despite everything that happened." He dropped to one knee, producing a simple solitaire diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" I looked down at this man who'd stood by me through the darkest period of my life, who'd helped me navigate corporate restructuring and family drama with equal skill, who'd never once tried to diminish my strength or redirect my ambitions. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how easily the word came. "But I'm keeping my name. I wouldn't have it any other way." Epilogue. 1 year later. The Chicago Botanic Garden was ablaze with autumn colors as guests gathered for what the society pages were calling the wedding of the decade. Sarah bustled around in her role as maid of honor, directing vendors and managing last-minute details with the efficiency of someone who learned to channel her energy into constructive purposes. I stood in the bridal suite, looking at myself in the mirror. I wasn't wearing my mother's dress. That was saved for Emma's future wedding. Instead, I'd chosen a simple but elegant design in ivory silk, with subtle pearl accents that honored my mother's memory without trying to recreate the past. Ready? Linda asked, adjusting my veil one final time. Through the window, I could see the assembled guests, business colleagues, family friends, and in a touch that would have seemed impossible a year ago, several of Richard's former victims, women who'd become friends and allies in our shared journey toward healing. Michael waited at the altar, looking handsome and slightly nervous in his black tuxedo. David Thornton stood beside him as best man, while Sarah took her place across from them, radiant in deep blue silk. As I walked down the aisle, I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment, the betrayal that had shattered my old life, the anger that had driven me to seek justice, the gradual realization that revenge without purpose is just destruction, but revenge with love at its heart can become redemption. Richard was serving his sentence in federal prison, his criminal network dismantled, his victims finally receiving both justice and financial restitution. Harris Industries was thriving under ethical leadership. Sarah was building a new life based on purpose rather than desperation. And I was marrying a man who saw my strength as something to be celebrated rather than controlled. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Margaret Pierce and Michael Chen. I looked out at the faces of the people who mattered most to me. Linda, who stood by me through 2 decades of friendship. David, who'd helped me navigate the complex world of corporate acquisition. Sarah, who'd learned that forgiveness is something you earn rather than something you're owed. Margaret, Michael said, taking my hands in his. You've taught me that love isn't about finding someone to complete you. It's about finding someone who sees you as complete already. Michael, I replied, my voice steady and sure. You've shown me that trust isn't something that can be stolen from you. It's something you choose to give. As we exchanged rings, I thought about my mother's words about love being the only inheritance that truly matters. She'd been right, but not in the way I'd originally understood. Love isn't something that gets passed down unchanged from generation to generation. It's something that gets tested, broken, rebuilt, and ultimately strengthened by the trials it survives. You may kiss the bride, the minister announced. As Michael's lips met mine, I heard Sarah's voice rise above the applause. To new beginnings. The crowd took up the toast, and I smiled against Michael's mouth. New beginnings, indeed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even with those who hurt you. Sometimes it's building something so beautiful from the wreckage that you forget why you wanted revenge in the first place. Final scene, the reception. That evening, as the reception wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself standing on the garden's terrace with Sarah, both of us slightly tipsy from champagne and emotion. Do you think Mom would have liked him? Sarah asked, watching Michael dance with his niece on the makeshift dance floor. I think she would have loved seeing us here together, I replied. Both of us whole, both of us choosing to build something instead of tearing it down. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I almost destroyed everything, didn't I? Our relationship, your business, your trust in people. You made mistakes. We both did. But you also found the courage to make them right. Even after everything I did to you, I turned to face my sister fully. Especially after everything you did to me. It would have been easy to write you off, to let Richard destroy you along with everything else. But that's not who we are. That's not who Mom raised us to be. In the distance, Michael caught my eye and smiled, raising his champagne glass in a silent toast. Tomorrow we'd fly to Italy for our honeymoon. Next month, we'd start house hunting for a place big enough for the family we hope to build. Next year, Sarah's daughter Emma would graduate from high school and start college on a scholarship funded by the Harris Industries Educational Foundation. The future stretched ahead of us, full of possibility and promise, built on the foundation of lessons learned through betrayal, justice, and ultimately, forgiveness. Come on, I said, taking Sarah's arm. Let's go dance with our dates. As we walked back toward the music and laughter, Sarah squeezed my hand. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For showing me what it means to be strong without being cruel. For teaching me that justice is better than revenge. for proving that love really is the only inheritance that matters. I squeezed her hand back, thinking of our mother's wedding dress hanging safely in Sarah's closet, waiting for the next generation to make their own memories, their own mistakes, their own journeys toward wisdom and grace. That's what sisters do, I said. We save each other. The music swelled around us as we rejoined the celebration, two women who'd learned that the worst betrayals can sometimes lead to the most beautiful redemptions. To truth, I said, raising my champagne flute in the candlelit ballroom, my voice carrying across the sea of surprised faces. The projector behind me flickered to life, displaying hotel surveillance footage of my husband David with my sister Rebecca, locked in an intimate embrace. To my 30 years of marriage built on lies. I watched David's face drain of color as the footage played. His hands trembled slightly around his own glass, the same hands that had caressed my face just this morning, promising forever, as they had for 3 decades. Elizabeth, stop this immediately. My mother's voice cut through the stunned silence, her carefully coiffed silver hair seeming to bristle with indignation. Why, mother? Are you worried about appearances? Or about what comes next? I pressed a button on the remote, and bank statements appeared on screen. Like how David transferred $600,000 from our joint equity line to fund Rebecca's boutique? Or how you've been manipulating my trust fund? The room felt so silent I could hear the air conditioning hum. These people, my family, had watched me spiral into self-doubt for months while protecting their secrets. They'd called me sensitive, emotional, unstable. They'd smile to my face while driving knives into my back. I was 52 years old. I had spent half my life building this family, supporting my husband's career, helping my sister find her footing. I had been the dutiful daughter, the loyal wife, the generous sister, and they had taken everything, my dignity, my trust, my peace of mind. Tonight, I was taking it all back. David Morgan, Jack's voice rang out as he stepped forward in his waiter's uniform. You've been served. Flashback, the first sign. It began with a scent. 4 months earlier, I was shelving books in the university library's special collections room when my phone buzzed with a text from David. Working late. Don't wait up. The same message I'd received 3 times that week. Strange for a man who, for most of our 30-year marriage, had been home promptly at 6, boasting about his disciplined schedule. That night, when he finally came home after 11, I was sitting in the dark living room, a cup of cold tea forgotten on the side table. He startled when he saw me. Beth? Why are you sitting in the dark? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I breathed in as he bent to kiss my cheek. There it was, that distinctive scent. Not his usual sandalwood cologne, but something lighter, more feminine. A fragrance I recognized. New perfume? I asked, my voice steadier than the trembling in my chest. He blinked, momentarily confused. What? The scent. It's different. Oh, he laughed, too casually. Must be from the Uber. Driver had one of those tree things. I nodded as if I believed him. As if that explained why my husband smelled like the $200 French perfume I had given my sister Rebecca for her birthday last month. The same perfume she had made such a fuss about, spraying it on her wrist and declaring it absolutely divine. You missed Grace's call, I said, referring to our daughter, away at college for her freshman year. She wanted to tell you about her English paper. I'll call her tomorrow, he said, already heading upstairs. I'm beat. I waited until I heard the shower running before picking up his discarded jacket. I pressed it to my nose, breathing in that telltale scent, memorizing it. Then I checked his pockets, nothing unusual. His wallet contained the expected: credit cards, driver's license, a few business cards. The receipts were all from places I recognized. But when I checked his phone, it was locked with a new passcode. In 25 years of marriage, we'd never locked our phones from each other. That night, I lay awake beside him, listening to his steady breathing, feeling like a stranger had replaced the man I married. The worst part wasn't the suspicion forming in my mind. It was the realization that I'd been expecting something like this for years. There had always been something too smooth about David, too practiced in his charm. The next morning, I called my sister. Rebecca? It's Beth. Beth, I was just thinking about you. Her voice was bright, animated, the same voice she'd used since childhood when trying to hide something. How was your spa weekend? I asked, referring to the solo reset she'd posted about on Instagram. Divine, she gushed. Exactly what I needed. The stress of running the boutique, you have no idea. I did have an idea, considering I'd loaned her the money to start it. Where did you go again? The Oasis in Santa Barbara. You should try it sometime. They have these massage treatments that, send me the info, I interrupted. Maybe I will. David's been saying I work too hard. Oh, she hesitated. Yes, of course. How is David? Working late a lot, I said, carefully casual. Some big development project. That's meant for you. She laughed, a little too loudly. Always chasing the next deal. After we hung up, I opened Instagram and scrolled to Rebecca's latest post. Solo reset. Just what this girl needed. #metimi, #selfcare, #beach vibes. The photo showed her on a pristine beach, sunglasses reflecting the sunset. I zoomed in on those reflections, examining them with the same attention to detail I use when authenticating rare manuscripts for the university library. There, in the curved glass of her designer's sunglasses, was the unmistakable reflection of a man. He wore a baseball cap and had a gold chain catching the sunlight. The university's baseball cap that David never took off during weekend outings, and the chain I'd given him for our 20th anniversary. My stomach clenched, but I kept scrolling. In another photo, she'd captured the hotel room's view. I saved the image, noting the distinctive pattern of the balcony railing. A quick search confirmed it belonged to the Cliffside Hotel in Santa Barbara, not the Oasis spa she'd mentioned. 25 years as a research librarian had taught me to be methodical. I created a secure document in my cloud drive, titled it Research Notes, and began cataloging my findings. March 15th. David claims late meeting. Rebecca posts sunset cocktail from girls' night. March 18th. David's jacket smells like Rebecca's perfume. March 22nd. Rebecca's solo reset weekend. Reflection in sunglasses matches David. March 23rd. Call with Rebecca. She mentioned Oasis Spa, but photos match Cliffside Hotel. That evening, I called my mother, Eleanor, careful to keep my voice neutral. Mom, have you talked to Rebecca lately? She went on this spa trip, and it sounded wonderful. Oh, yes. She mentioned something about that. My mother's voice had a strange, guarded quality. She went alone, right? I pressed. I believe so. A pause. Elizabeth, is everything all right? You sound tense. Just tired. End of semester rush at the library. You've always worked too hard, dear. Perhaps you should take something. A little Valium did wonders for me at your age. My age meaning 52, the age when women supposedly became invisible, unreliable, hysterical. My mother had been subtly undermining me this way for decades, but I'd always dismissed it as generational differences. I'm fine, Mom. Just curious about Rebecca's trip. She seemed happy. Well, your sister deserves some happiness. Not everyone is as fortunate as you, with your perfect husband and job security. After we hung up, I added another note to my document, March 23rd, called Mom. She deflected questions about Rebecca's trip. Suggested I take Valium. That night, David came home on time, bringing takeout from my favorite Thai place. He was attentive, asking about my day, laughing at all the right moments. It was like watching an actor perform a role he'd played for years, the devoted husband, but now I could see the performance. I've been thinking, he said, refilling my wine glass. We should take a trip this summer. Maybe Italy? You've always wanted to see Florence. I studied him, wondering if this sudden generosity was guilt or strategy. What about your Westbrook development? I thought the groundbreaking was in July. He waved dismissively. I can delegate. You're more important, am I? The words slipped out before I could stop them. He reached across the table, taking my hand. Of course you are, Beth. You're everything to me. I smiled and squeezed his hand, feeling the wedding band I'd placed there 30 years ago. Then Italy sounds perfect. Later, alone in my home office, I added his sudden travel suggestion to my notes, along with a news section, financial records. If my suspicions were correct, there would be a paper trail. I pulled up our joint accounts, credit card statements, investment portfolios. Everything looked normal at first glance. Then I noticed a large withdrawal from our home equity line, $600,000, authorized with both our signatures. Except I had never signed such a document. I stared at the digital copy of my supposed signature, feeling ice form in my veins. In my 25 years as a research librarian, I'd become something of an expert in document authentication. The signature was good, very good, but it wasn't mine. The pressure points were wrong, the final stroke too elongated. My husband had forged my signature to withdraw over $500,000 from our home equity. I checked the date. It coincided with the opening of Rebecca's boutique 5 years ago. The boutique she'd proudly claimed to have funded herself through smart investments. The betrayal wasn't just sexual. It was financial. It was complete. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark, my mind racing through 30 years of memories, recontextualizing every moment, every conversation, every family gathering. How long had this been going on? How many people knew? Was I the only one being deceived, or was I the only one who hadn't been in on the joke? That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I made a decision. I would not confront them, not yet. I would gather every piece of evidence, build an airtight case, and when the time was right, I would reclaim everything they had taken from me. My dignity, my agency, my truth. I was a librarian after all, and no one was better at research than me. At the university library, "You look like hell," Maggie said, setting a coffee on my desk the next morning. My oldest friend, now a successful attorney specializing in women's legal issues, had the kind of bluntness that came from decades of friendship. I glanced around the library's administrative office to ensure we were alone. "I need to talk to you." "Not here." Maggie's expression sharpened. She'd known me since our undergraduate days and could read my moods better than anyone. "Lunch? That new place on Maple?" I nodded, grateful for her discretion. The morning crawled by as I cataloged new acquisitions, met with the dean about budget allocations, and helped a graduate student locate obscure journals for her dissertation, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy that felt like it might crack with each passing hour. At lunch, in a corner booth far from the university crowd, I told Maggie everything. The perfume, the Instagram photos, the forged signature, all of it, I concluded, watching her expression shift from concern to outrage. "That son of a bitch," she whispered. "And your sister? Your own sister?" I nodded, throat tight. "I think my mother knows too." The way she deflected. "Families can be poisonous," Maggie said, reaching for my hand. She would know. Her own husband had left her for a colleague 15 years ago. "What are you going to do?" "I need more proof. Concrete evidence they can't explain away." Maggie's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "I know someone. Jack Harmon, ex-cop, now private investigator. Completely discreet, very thorough. He helped one of my clients last year in a similar situation. I'm not sure I can afford." "He owes me a favor," she interrupted. "And he hates cheaters. His ex-wife took him for everything." I hesitated. Hiring a private investigator seemed so dramatic, so final. Once I took that step, there would be no going back to blissful ignorance. "Beth," Maggie said gently, "you already know the truth. All you're doing now is documenting it." I nodded, squaring my shoulders. "Set it up." 2 days later, I met Jack Harmon in a coffee shop 3 towns over. He was older than I expected, mid-60s with salt and pepper hair and the watchful eyes of someone who'd seen too much of human nature's darker side. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, his handshake firm. "Maggie explained your situation." "Call me Beth," I said. "And yes, I need evidence of an affair between my husband and my sister, as well as financial misconduct." He nodded, expression neutral. "Infidelity cases are my bread and butter. Financial fraud takes more time, but it's all connected. I charge $200 an hour plus expenses." I'll need a $2,000 retainer. I slid an envelope across the table. 3,000. I want to be thorough. He pocketed it without counting. I'll need their routines, schedules, addresses, the works. And I'll need you to act completely normal. No confrontations, no suspicious behavior. I've been researching and cataloging for weeks, I told him. I can send you everything I have. Jack smiled slightly. Maggie said you were methodical. Good. Makes my job easier. Before we parted, he asked one final question. Are you sure you want to know everything I find? Some clients think they do, until they see the photos. I met his gaze steadily. Mr. Harmon, I've spent 30 years building my life around a lie. There's nothing you could show me that would be worse than not knowing the truth. He nodded once, a gesture of respect. I'll be in touch within a week. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange lightness. For weeks, I'd been carrying the weight of suspicion alone. Now I had allies, Maggie with her legal expertise, Jack with his investigative skills. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't sensitive or emotional. I was being systematically gaslit by the people who claimed to love me. And I was finally fighting back. Flashback, family dinner, Sunday dinner, and my mother's house had been a tradition for as long as I could remember. Eleanor Sullivan, with her perfectly maintained colonial home and her obsession with appearances, insisted on gathering the family weekly, like civilized people. The first dinner after I hired Jack was excruciating. I sat at my mother's polished mahogany table, surrounded by the people who had betrayed me, forcing myself to smile and pass the potatoes. Beth, you're awfully quiet tonight, my father Walter noted, his kind eyes concerned behind his glasses. At 76, he had always been the gentler parent, preferring to avoid conflict while my mother ruled the family with her iron opinions. Just tired, I replied, the same excuse I'd been using for weeks. End of semester crunch at the library. Still not sleeping well, dear? My mother asked, her voice laden with artificial concern. I worry about you. Women our age need to be careful about stress. It affects our hormones. I resisted the urge to point out that at 73, her hormones and mine were hardly in the same category. I'm fine, Mother. David squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture that once would have comforted me. Now it took everything I had not to pull away. Beth's always been the strongest one in the family, he said, smiling at me with practiced affection. That's why I married her. Rebecca laughed, the sound like glass breaking. That and her library salary while you were starting out. An uncomfortable silence fell. It was true. My steady income as a librarian had supported us during David's early years in real estate development. I'd paid the bills while he built the business that had made him a millionaire. Don't be ridiculous, Rebecca, my mother scolded. David would have succeeded regardless. He has the magic touch. My cousin Patty nodded enthusiastically. Everyone says David's the best developer in the county. Nathan's firm is so grateful for his business. She gestured to her husband, who managed the finances at one of David's partner companies. Speaking of business, Rebecca interjected, the boutique's doing amazingly well. I'm thinking of expanding to a second location. I studied my sister, noting the new designer watch on her wrist, the freshly highlighted hair, the confidence of someone whose financial worries had mysteriously vanished. The boutique that my husband had secretly funded with our money. That's wonderful, I said. What's your financing plan for expansion? Rebecca faltered slightly. Oh, business loans, investors. Boring stuff. Not boring at all, I insisted. I'd love to hear the details sometime. Maybe I could stop by the boutique this week? David cleared his throat. Beth's thinking about taking a more active role in investments. All those years managing the library budget have given her quite the head for finance. The subtle redirect didn't escape me. David was protecting Rebecca, steering the conversation away from dangerous territory. How is Grace doing at college? My father asked, changing the subject entirely. She called last week, something about switching majors. I allowed the conversation to move on, but I didn't miss the look that passed between David and Rebecca, or the way my mother watched them both with calculating eyes. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Rebecca's purse sat on the counter, carelessly open. A quick glance inside revealed a hotel keycard sleeve from the cliffside. I snapped a photo with my phone, careful not to disturb anything. When I returned to the dining room, my mother was serving coffee and my father's homemade apple pie. "Beth," she said, "have you thought any more about seeing Dr. Levinson? He did wonders for my anxiety back in the day." "I don't have anxiety, Mother," I replied, accepting a slice of pie. "I'm just busy. Well, you've seemed distracted lately. We worry, don't we, David?" My husband nodded, his concern so convincing it almost fooled even me. "You have been working too hard, Beth. Maybe a vacation would help? I could move some meetings around. We could go to the coast for a weekend." I smiled, imagining Jack Harmon photographing them at the cliffside while David claimed to be at business meetings. "That sounds lovely. Let's plan something." Later, as David and I drove home, he reached over and took my hand. "Your mother means well, you know." "She always does," I replied, staring out the window at the familiar streets of the town where I'd spent most of my adult life. "Everyone always means well. Are you sure you're okay? You've been different lately." I turned to look at him, this man I'd woken up beside for 30 years. The face I knew better than my own. The biggest lie of my life. "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking about changes." "Changes?" he echoed, a flicker of unease crossing his features. "At the library," I amended smoothly. "Budget restructuring. Nothing interesting." He relaxed visibly. "Well, don't let it keep you up tonight. You need your rest." "Don't worry," I said, squeezing his hand with false affection. "I'm sleeping better than I have in years." It wasn't until we got home that I added detailed notes about the dinner to my growing file, including verbatim quotes and observations about body language. If my family wanted to gaslight me into believing I was imagining things, I would document every interaction so meticulously that even I couldn't doubt my own perceptions. At the Library of the Evidence, a week after hiring Jack, I was cataloging rare books in the university library's special collections room when my phone buzzed with an email notification. Subject line: Preliminary findings. I locked the room and retreated to my private office, hands trembling slightly as I opened the attachment. Inside was a zip file protected with the password we'd agreed upon. I entered it, and dozens of photos appeared on my screen. David and Rebecca entering the Cliffside Hotel. David's hand on the small of her back. The two of them laughing in the hotel bar. Kissing in the elevator. Entering a room together. Timestamps indicated the photos had been taken over 3 separate occasions during the past week. The most recent was from 2 days ago, the afternoon David had told me he was meeting with investors in the next county. Below the photos was a preliminary financial report. Jack had traced the $600,000 from our home equity line to a series of transfers that ultimately led to Rebecca's boutique business account. He'd also found evidence of multiple jewelry purchases on David's private credit card, items that had never been given to me. I sat back in my chair, a strange calm settling over me. The evidence was undeniable. My husband and sister were having an affair. They had stolen my money. And based on the timeline Jack had constructed, it had been going on for at least 5 years. 5 years. The boutique opening. The sudden improvement in Rebecca's lifestyle. David's increased business trips. It all aligned perfectly. I closed the email and sat in silence, surrounded by the ancient books I'd spent my career preserving and protecting. Books full of human stories, love, betrayal, revenge, redemption. Now I was living one of those stories, and I needed to decide how it would end. My office phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. "Beth Morgan," I answered automatically. "Mrs. Morgan, it's Jack. Did you receive my email?" "Yes. Just now. I don't usually follow up like this, but there's more. I didn't include it in the report because I wanted to discuss it with you first." I straightened in my chair. "What is it?" "I found something in your mother's financial records. A trust fund in your name that you're apparently unaware of. The statements go to your mother's address." My grip tightened on the phone. "What kind of trust fund?" "Substantial. Set up by your maternal grandfather." You should have gained control when you turned 50, but the paperwork was manipulated. Your mother has been managing it, making distributions to your sister's business account and, interestingly, to a silent partner account under your husband's name. The room seemed to tilt sideways. How much? Based on the quarterly statements? Over 2 million. $2 million. Dollars. My inheritance. Being funneled to my sister and husband without my knowledge. Mrs. Morgan? Are you still there? Call me Beth, I said automatically. And yes, I'm here. Can you get me documentation of all of this? Already working on it. I've also recorded some interesting conversations. Your mother and husband discussing how to keep you compliant. Your sister and mother talking about the trust fund. My hand trembled, but my voice remained steady. I want it all, Mr. Harmon. Every document, every recording, every photo. I want it organized chronologically with clear annotations. Planning something? Justice, I replied simply. I'm planning justice. After hanging up, I sat motionless, letting the full weight of the betrayal sink in. Not just David and Rebecca's affair, that pain, while acute, was almost secondary now. It was the conspiracy, the systematic gaslighting, the financial exploitation. My entire family had been complicit in stealing my inheritance, my dignity, my reality. A memory surfaced, my mother at Sunday dinner, suggesting I needed medication, implying I was unstable. David agreeing that I worked too hard, needed rest. Rebecca with her concerned looks and whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. They'd been setting me up for years, establishing a pattern of Elizabeth's emotional problems so that if I ever discovered the truth, no one would believe me. I opened my desk drawer and removed a small voice recorder, the same one I used for cataloging verbal descriptions of rare manuscripts. I set it on the desk, pressed record, and began to speak. My name is Elizabeth Morgan. Today is April 15, 2025. I am of sound mind and body, and I am recording this statement as evidence of the systematic fraud, gaslighting, and betrayal perpetrated against me by my husband David Morgan, my sister Rebecca Collins, and my mother Eleanor Sullivan. For the next hour, I detailed everything I knew, everything I suspected, and everything I planned to do about it. When I finished, I saved the recording to my secure cloud drive, alongside my growing collection of evidence. Then I called Maggie. I need your legal expertise, I said when she answered. And I need you to clear your calendar for the company anniversary party next month. That bad? Worse, I replied. But I have a plan. Flashback, the first betrayal. I met David Morgan in my junior year of college. I was 21, serious and studious, already planning my career in library science. He was 24, just starting business school after working construction for a few years, charming, ambitious, with the kind of confidence that made people want to follow him. We met in the university library, where I worked part-time. He was researching real estate development models and stayed until closing, asking thoughtful questions that made me feel both knowledgeable and desirable. No one had ever looked at me the way David did, like I was the most fascinating person in the world. When he asked me to dinner, I said yes immediately. By our third date, I was in love. By graduation, we were engaged. We married when I was 25 and he was 28, full of plans for the future. The early years were hard but happy. My librarian's salary supported us while David built his business. We lived in a tiny apartment, saved every penny, and dreamed of the day his real estate developments would take off. I never resented being the breadwinner. I believed in him completely. When I was 28, my grandfather died, leaving me devastated. He had been my biggest supporter, the one who'd encouraged my love of books and learning when my mother dismissed it as hiding from real life. At the funeral, my mother took control of everything, as she always did. Your grandfather left some money for you, she told me afterward. I'll handle the details. You know how you are with paperwork when you're emotional. I nodded, too grief-stricken to argue. That was the first betrayal, the moment my mother began hiding my inheritance. I didn't realize it then. I trusted her, as daughters do. A year later, David's first major development succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. Suddenly, we had money, real money. We bought a house in a good neighborhood, took vacations, started talking about children. Let's wait a bit longer, David would say whenever I brought up starting a family. Just until the business is more stable. I agreed, always the practical one. I focused on my career, working my way up from reference librarian to department head, finally to library director. I love my work, the quiet purpose of it, the sense of preserving knowledge for future generations. We didn't have our daughter Grace until I was 33, the result of an unexpected pregnancy that David initially seemed ambivalent about. But once she was born, he became the doting father, the man my friends envied me for. You're so lucky, they'd say. David is such a hands-on dad. And he was, when it suited him, when it aligned with his public image as the successful businessman with the perfect family. What I didn't see then were the patterns forming. His charm deployed strategically, his attention always calculated for maximum effect. When Rebecca's first marriage ended in her early 30s, she moved back to town, broken and directionless. I was the one who suggested she stay with us until she found her footing. You're such a good sister, David said, kissing my forehead. That's what I love about you, always taking care of everyone. I didn't notice then how his eyes followed Rebecca around our house, how they began having coffee together on mornings when I left early for work. I didn't question their shared jokes, their sudden common interests. I was too busy being the responsible one, raising Grace, managing the library, maintaining our home, supporting my aging parents. I was so focused on holding everything together that I missed the cracks forming at the foundation. 5 years ago, when Rebecca announced she was opening a boutique, I was genuinely happy for her. She'd always had an eye for fashion, and the venture seemed to give her purpose after years of drifting. How are you financing it? I asked, practical as always. I've been saving, she said vaguely, and I got a small business loan. David backed her up. Rebecca's got good credit. Banks love to support female entrepreneurs these days. I believed them. I even helped her set up the shop, organizing inventory systems based on my library cataloging experience. David came by often, offering business advice, bringing lunch for both of us. The day of the grand opening, Rebecca hugged me tightly. I couldn't have done this without you, Beth. I thought she meant my organizational help, my moral support. I didn't realize she was referring to my money, stolen from me by the two people I trusted most. Now, sitting in my library office with Jack's evidence spread before me, I could see the whole pattern. The systematic betrayal that had been going on right under my nose for years. I gathered the documents, securing them in my locked desk drawer. Then I went back to cataloging rare books, finding comfort in the familiar routine of preservation and organization. Soon, very soon, I would expose everything. But first, I needed to preserve the most important artifact of all, the truth. The setup. The next 3 weeks required the performance of my life. I maintained perfect normalcy, preparing for the end of the academic year at the library, attending family dinners, sleeping beside my husband as if I didn't know he was planning to meet my sister the moment I left for work. I even cultivated a new demeanor, calmer, more acquiescent. I stopped questioning David's late meetings. I called my mother more often, seeking her advice on trivial matters. I invited Rebecca for lunch and complimented her boutique success. You seem better, David commented one evening as we prepared dinner together. More like your old self. I smiled, chopping vegetables with methodical precision. I've been thinking a lot about what matters. Family. Stability. You were right. I was working too hard, letting stress get to me. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. I'm glad to hear it. You know, I only want what's best for you. I leaned back against him, suppressing the revulsion I felt at his touch. I know. I'm lucky to have you. That night, after David fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and went to my home office. Jack had sent more evidence, recordings of phone conversations between David and my mother. She's calmer lately, David's voice came through my headphones. I think the medication is working. I froze. Medication? I wasn't taking any medication. My mother's voice replied, Eleanor's been slipping it into her tea when she visits. Just a mild sedative. Nothing harmful. Good. The trust distribution is next month. We need her compliant until then. Don't worry about Elizabeth. I've managed her for 50 years. She always believes what we tell her. I removed my headphones, hands trembling with rage. They had been drugging me. My own mother had been putting sedatives in my tea during my weekly visits. The violation was profound, sickening. But it also explained the persistent brain fog I'd been fighting, the unusual fatigue after Sunday dinners at my parents' house. I opened my secure document and added this new information, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I documented dates, symptoms, and correlations with my visits to my mother's house. Then I emailed Jack. Need complete recordings of all conversations regarding medication. Also need samples tested if possible. His reply came within minute. Will acquire. Meeting tomorrow? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in the next town. Then I deleted the emails, cleared my browser history, and returned to bed. David was still sleeping soundly, one arm thrown casually across my pillow. I slid back under the covers, keeping as much distance as possible without seeming suspicious. Tomorrow, I would take another step toward justice. But tonight, I needed to rest. The final act of this tragedy was approaching, and I needed my strength. At the coffee shop was tucked away in a strip mall 2 towns over, far from anyone who might recognize me. Jack sat in a corner booth, a manila envelope on the table before him. Mrs. Morgan, he nodded as I slid into the seat across from him. Any trouble getting the recordings? I asked, skipping pleasantries. None. Your mother's home security system was embarrassingly easy to access remotely. She has cameras in most rooms, for security purposes. And the medication? He slid the envelope toward me. Diazepam, commonly known as Valium. I retrieved a sample from her medicine cabinet and had it tested. The dosage is low, but consistent, enough to make you feel foggy, compliant, maybe question your own perceptions. I opened the envelope and examined the lab report, my librarian's eye immediately noting the details. This is criminal. It is, Jack agreed. Along with the financial fraud, the identity theft, the forged documents, you have enough for criminal charges. But you said you wanted something more comprehensive. I nodded. The criminal justice system would punish them legally, but it wouldn't expose the full extent of their betrayal. I want everyone to know what they did. I want them to face the people who respected them, admired them, believed in them. The company anniversary party, Jack said, understanding in his eyes. You're planning to expose everything there. 25 years of Morgan development. The family business built on stolen money and lies. David's invited every important person in town, business associates, community leaders, friends. My mother will be there, playing the proud matriarch. Rebecca will be there, pretending to be the supportive sister. And you'll be there with evidence they can't deny. Jack nodded appreciatively. It's elegant, devastating. I've already arranged for Maggie to prepare the legal documents. Divorce papers for David, civil suits against all of them. She'll have a process server ready. You want me there? As the server, I confirmed. You know all the players. You'll know exactly when to step in. Jack's expression was unreadable. This kind of public exposure. There's no going back. Your family will never forgive you. I met his gaze steadily. They're not my family anymore. They're just people who betrayed me. He nodded once, acknowledging the finality in my voice. I'll be there. Black tie, I assume? The works, I confirmed. It's the social event of the season, according to my mother. As I stood to leave, Jack touched my arm lightly. One more thing. I found something else while investigating your family finances. It's sensitive. More sensitive than drugging me and stealing my inheritance? I asked dryly. Different. He hesitated. I ran background checks on everyone involved. Standard procedure. Your father's medical records showed something interesting. A procedure from before you were born. I sat back down slowly. What kind of procedure? A vasectomy. 3 years before you were conceived. The world seemed to stop. That's not possible. Medical records don't lie. Jack said gently. I had my contact run a second check to confirm. Walter Sullivan had a vasectomy in 1970. You were born in 1973. I stared at him, processing the implications. He's not my biological father. It appears not. Does he know? Jack shrugged. Can't say for sure. But given your mother's other deceptions. I closed my eyes briefly. Another lie. Another fundamental truth about my life revealed to be false. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. Add it to the file. Are you sure? This particular revelation might be unnecessarily painful for both of you. I shook my head. No more secrets. No more lies. Everything comes out. As I left the coffee shop, a strange calm settled over me. The final piece had clicked into place. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my dignity. I was fighting for my very identity. The preparation. The week before the anniversary party, I visited Maggie's law office to finalize the legal documents. Everything's ready, she said, spreading papers across her desk. Divorce filings citing adultery and financial misconduct. Civil suits for fraud, identity theft, and misappropriation of funds. A separate action regarding the trust fund. I scanned the documents, my mind clinical and detached. And the DNA results? She slid a sealed envelope toward me. Confirmed. Walter Sullivan is not your biological father. The lab compared your DNA sample with his medical records. I placed the envelope in my purse without opening it. The trust fund, can we freeze it immediately? The moment you give the word. I've already prepared the injunction. You should know, though, they've been depleting it rapidly over the past month, almost as if they know something's coming. They're nervous, I said. They've noticed my change in behavior, but they've convinced themselves I'm finally breaking down, becoming more manageable. Little do they know. Maggie studied me, concern in her eyes. Beth, are you sure about this? Going nuclear at the party? We could handle this more privately. They didn't give me privacy, I replied. They didn't give me dignity. Why should I extend courtesies they never granted me? Because you're better than them, she said simply. I considered this, then shook my head. Not anymore. They've taught me too well. Maggie sighed. At least let me be there. For support. You will be, I assured her. I've added you to the guest list as my +1. David was delighted. He thinks you're coming to keep an eye on me. Your husband's a piece of work, Maggie muttered. Soon to be ex-husband, I corrected. And yes, he is. The night before the party, I stood in my closet, selecting my outfit with the same careful attention I gave to preserving rare manuscripts. The black dress was elegant, conservative, appropriate for a company founder's wife. The red lipstick would be my only concession to drama. I heard David enter the bedroom behind me. The black one, he suggested, coming to stand beside me. You always look stunning in that. I smiled. Black it is, then. He kissed my cheek, his hand lingering on my waist. I'm proud of you, Beth. Tomorrow's a big day for us. 25 years of Morgan development. A real accomplishment, I agreed. Built from nothing. Well, not nothing, he chuckled. Your support made it all possible. I couldn't have done it without you. For once, he was telling the absolute truth. Without my stolen inheritance, without my forged signature on loan documents, without my salary supporting us in the early years, David Morgan would be nothing. I know, I said, allowing genuine emotion to color my voice for the first time in weeks. I know exactly how much you owe me, David. He misinterpreted my intensity as affection, pulling me close for a kiss. I returned it mechanically, counting the hours until I would never have to pretend again. Later, after he fell asleep, I went to my home office and opened my laptop for a final review of the evidence. Photos, financial records, voice recordings, medical test results, DNA analysis, the complete documentation of 30 years of lies. I compiled everything into a presentation set to run automatically with a single click of a remote. Then I emailed a backup copy to Maggie, Jack, and my own secure cloud storage. Finally, I recorded one last voice memo for myself. Tomorrow, I reclaim my life. Whatever happens next, I will never again allow anyone to make me doubt my own reality. I will never again shrink myself to accommodate others' lies. I will never again sacrifice my truth for someone else's comfort. I closed the laptop and returned to bed, falling into the first peaceful sleep I'd had in months. Opening at the anniversary party, the grand ballroom of the Westbrook Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and success. 200 of the city's most prominent citizens mingled, champagne flutes in hand, celebrating the 25th anniversary of Morgan Development. David worked the room masterfully, his charm on full display as he moved from group to group, accepting congratulations and sharing anecdotes about the company's humble beginnings. My mother, elegant in blue silk, held court near the bar, playing the proud mother-in-law who had always believed in David's potential. Rebecca, stunning in a dress I recognized from her boutique's premium collection, kept a careful distance from David while still managing to be photographed near him at strategic moments. I stood with Maggie, watching it all unfold like a theater production. "They're good," Maggie murmured. "I'll give them that." "Years of practice," I replied, sipping water from a champagne flute. "No alcohol tonight." I needed perfect clarity. Jack, dressed as a waiter, circulated with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, occasionally catching my eye to confirm positions. The envelope with David's name was tucked inside his jacket, ready to be served at the perfect moment. At precisely 8 o'clock, the hotel manager clinked a glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats for dinner and the evening's presentation." We moved to the assigned tables, a careful seating chart I had personally overseen. David, Rebecca, my mother and father, Patty and Nathan, all at the head table with me. Maggie at the adjacent table with the company's top executives. Jack positioned behind David, ready to step forward. The first course was served as David's business partner gave a glowing introduction, highlighting the company's growth from a small local developer to a regional powerhouse. David smiled modestly, his hand occasionally touching mine in a display of partnership. After the main course, David stood to give his speech. He thanked his team, his investors, the community leaders who had supported Morgan Development's vision. Then he turned to me. "Most of all, I want to thank my wife, Elizabeth. For 25 years, she has been my foundation, my support, my conscience. Without her, none of this would exist." Applause filled the room. David extended his hand to me, inviting me to stand beside him. I rose smoothly, allowing him to put his arm around my waist. "Beth has always been the quiet force behind Morgan Development," he continued. "The organized mind that kept us on track when I wanted to take wild risks. The voice of reason when I needed guidance." More applause. I smiled, waiting for my moment. "Would you like to say a few words, darling?" David asked, offering me the microphone. I took it, my hand steady. "Thank you, David. You're right. I've been quiet for too long." I stepped away from him, moving to the center of the small stage. The room fell silent, anticipating the expected platitudes from the supportive wife. "Morgan Development is indeed a remarkable success story," I began. "A company built from nothing, as David likes to say." "But that's not quite accurate, is it?" Confusion flickered across David's face. My mother straightened in her chair, suddenly alert. "The truth is, Morgan Development was built on theft, on fraud, on betrayal." I kept my voice calm, conversational. "It was built with money stolen from me, my inheritance, my home equity, my trust." The room went completely still. David stepped toward me, his smile frozen. "Beth, you're tired. Maybe we should." "I'm not tired, David. I'm awake." Finally, completely awake. I turned back to the audience. For years, I've been told I'm too emotional, too sensitive, imagining things. Turns out, I wasn't imagining anything. I pressed the remote in my hand, and the large screen behind me came to life. The hotel security footage appeared, showing David and Rebecca entering a room together, his hand on her waist, her head on his shoulder. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Rebecca's face drained of color. My mother half rose from her seat. "To truth," I said, raising my champagne flute in the candlelit ballroom, my voice carrying across the sea of surprised faces. To my 30 years of marriage built on lies. I watched David's face drain of color as the footage played. His hands trembled slightly around his own glass, the same hands that had caressed my face just this morning, promising forever, as they had for 3 decades. Elizabeth, stop this immediately. My mother's voice cut through the stunned silence, her carefully coiffed silver hair seeming to bristle with indignation. Why, mother? Are you worried about appearances? Or about what comes next? I pressed another button on the remote, and bank statements appeared on screen. Like how David transferred $600,000 from our joint equity line to fund Rebecca's boutique? Or how you've been manipulating my trust fund. The room fell so silent I could hear the air conditioning hum. These people, my family, had watched me spiral into self-doubt for months while protecting their secrets. They'd called me sensitive, emotional, unstable. They'd smile to my face while driving knives into my back. I was 52 years old. I had spent half my life building this family, supporting my husband's career, helping my sister find her footing. I had been the dutiful daughter, the loyal wife, the generous sister. And they had taken everything, my dignity, my trust, my peace of mind. Tonight, I was taking it all back. David Morgan, Jack's voice rang out as he stepped forward in his waiter's uniform. You've been served. David took the envelope automatically, staring at it in confusion. What the hell is this? Divorce papers, I replied calmly. And a full list of charges. Fraud, theft, identity theft, misappropriation of funds. Rebecca stood, tears already streaming down her face. Beth, please. You don't understand. Sit down. I snapped, my voice like ice. She collapsed back into her chair. My mother was next. Elizabeth, what are you doing? This is a private family matter. Privacy? I laughed. Like when you discussed drugging me with Valium to keep me compliant? Like when you conspired to hide my trust fund? Those private family matters? I clicked the remote again. My mother's voice filled the ballroom. We need to keep Elizabeth compliant. She can't find out about the trust until after the transfer. Her face went ashen. Turn that off. No, I said. We're just getting started. I moved methodically through the evidence. The forged signatures. The shell company. The secret accounts. With each revelation, the audience's shock deepened. Business associates exchanged alarmed glances. Friends whispered behind their hands. The community leaders David had so carefully cultivated looked increasingly uncomfortable. Patty, my cousin, tried to intervene. Beth, you're obviously upset. Maybe we should continue this privately. Private conversations are what got us here, Patty. You knew, didn't you? You and Nathan both knew David was stealing from me to fund Rebecca's boutique. Nathan studied his plate intently. Patty's denial died on her lips. I saved the most devastating revelation for last. Turning to my father, I said gently, Dad, I'm sorry. You're the only one who deserves an apology tonight. His kind eyes, confused and hurt, met mine. What for, Bethy? I walked to his chair and handed him an envelope. This is the result of a DNA test. You're not my biological father. The collective gasp was audible. My mother stood abruptly. You had no right. I had every right, I replied. My entire life has been a lie. Every fundamental truth about who I am, where I came from, what I was entitled to, all lies. My father, Walter, opened the envelope with trembling hands. He read the contents, his face crumpling with grief. Did you know? I asked him softly. He shook his head, tears falling onto the paper. No, Bethy. I never knew. I believed him. In that moment, I realized he had been as deceived as I had, another victim of my mother's manipulations. David, recovering from his initial shock, stood and approached me. Elizabeth, we can work this out. There's no need for this spectacle. I made mistakes, yes, but I still love you. Love? I echoed, stepping back from him. You don't know the meaning of the word. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't gaslight and manipulate and betray. You're blowing up your entire life, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. For what? Revenge? Not revenge, I corrected him. Justice. Truth. Freedom. I addressed the room at large. For 30 years, I've been told what to think, how to feel, what to believe. I've been drugged to make me more compliant. I've been lied to about my very identity. I've been robbed of my inheritance and gaslighted when I noticed discrepancies. I looked directly at David. I'm not blowing up my life. I'm reclaiming it. From the corner of the room, a man in a navy suit stepped forward. Mr. Morgan, I'm with the State Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to ask you some questions about certain transfers from your wife's accounts. David's face went from red to white. This is a misunderstanding. Save it for your lawyer, the investigator advised, handing him a card. We'll be in touch. Rebecca, still crying, approached me. Beth, please. I didn't know about the money. I thought David was investing in me because he believed in me. While sleeping with you, I added flatly. Such a generous brother-in-law. I made a mistake. I was lonely, and he was there, and I wasn't important enough to consider. I finished for her. My feelings, my marriage, my trust. None of it mattered compared to your desires. That's not fair. No, I agreed. None of this is fair. But it's true. My mother, recovering her composure, tried a different approach. Elizabeth, you've always been high-strung, emotional. This dramatic display is exactly why we've been concerned about your stability. I smiled coldly. Nice try, mother. But the blood tests showing Valium in my system after your Sunday teas tell a different story. She blanched. That was for your own good. You were getting difficult. Difficult meaning observant, questioning, no longer easily manipulated. I shook my head. You don't get to define my reality anymore. I turned to the stunned audience. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. This was the only way to ensure the truth came out completely, without being buried by more lies. Then I looked back at my family, the people who had betrayed me so thoroughly. You all lied. You all knew. And you let me drown while pretending to save me. You taught me silence. You taught me shame. And now I'm teaching you consequences. I walked toward the exit, Maggie falling into step beside me. David called after me. You'll regret this. I paused, looking back over my shoulder. No, I said with perfect certainty. You will. As the ballroom doors closed behind us, cutting off the shocked murmurs and desperate exclamations, Maggie squeezed my arm. You did it. I did, I agreed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Outside in the cool evening air, I looked up at the stars. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly free, free of lies, free of manipulation, free of the crushing weight of others' expectations. I opened my compact mirror and checked my reflection. Red lipstick still perfect. Eyes clear. Hands steady. I smiled at my own image. Happy birthday to me. The aftermath. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. By the time I arrived home that night, my phone was overflowing with missed calls and messages. David, Rebecca, my mother, Patty, all desperate to control the narrative, to pull me back into their web. I silenced the phone and sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights below. Maggie had offered to stay, but I needed this moment alone, this first night of my new life. Inside, the house felt different already. Knowing I would soon leave it, this beautiful prison David had built with my stolen money gave every room a transient quality, like a hotel I was merely passing through. The next morning brought the first headlines. Prominent developer accused of fraud and infidelity. The local business journal was more specific. Morgan Development founder facing financial crimes investigation. None mentioned me by name, but in our community, everyone would know. I received an email from Jack with a subject line, Final documentation. Inside was evidence that David had attempted to move funds offshore after the party, only to discover the accounts had been frozen by court order. His panic was palpable in the frantic phone calls Jack had recorded to Rebecca, to his lawyer, to my mother. The university president called, offering a leave of absence during this difficult time. I declined politely. The library is where I feel most stable, I told him truthfully. Most myself. That afternoon, I drove to Rebecca's boutique. The windows were already covered in brown paper, a temporarily closed sign on the door. I used the spare key she'd given me years ago to enter one last time. The space felt hollow, racks half emptied, display cases cleared of the most valuable items. Rebecca had clearly been preparing for a quick exit. In the back office, her desk drawers hung open, emptied of important documents. But she'd missed something, a photo album tucked behind the filing cabinet. I pulled it out and flipped through the pages. Photos of Rebecca and David together at a beach house I'd never seen. Weekend getaways disguised as business trips. Anniversary celebrations, their anniversary, not ours. 5 years of memories documented with the meticulous care of someone treasuring a real relationship, not just an affair. I closed the album and left it on the desk. Let her come back for it if she dared. That evening, David appeared at my door. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, clothes rumpled. Nothing like the polished businessman who had charmed a ballroom full of people just 24 hours earlier. I didn't invite him in, speaking to him through the barely open door. Elizabeth, he said, his voice hoarse. Please. We need to talk. There's nothing to say, David. The lawyers will handle everything from here. You can't do this to me, he pleaded. I'm losing everything, the business, my reputation, my future. You did this to yourself, I corrected him. I'm simply ensuring you face the consequences. He shifted tactics, his voice softening. We had 30 years together, Beth. Doesn't that count for anything? We can work through this. Couples survive affairs all the time. This wasn't just an affair, I replied. It was a systematic betrayal that included theft, fraud, and gaslighting. You didn't just cheat on me, you stole from me, lied to me, and tried to make me think I was losing my mind. I made mistakes, he admitted. Terrible mistakes. But I did love you in my way. Your way isn't love, David. It's ownership. It's control. It's manipulation. He stared at me, suddenly seeming to realize the woman before him was not the compliant, insecure wife he'd grown accustomed to managing. You've changed. No, I said. I've remembered who I am. His expression hardened. Rebecca's a mess because of you. She's not eating, not sleeping. She's talking about moving away. That's her choice. She's your sister. No, I corrected him. She was my sister. Now she's just someone who betrayed me. He looked at me for a long moment. You're not the same woman I married. I smiled, feeling a genuine flash of relief. Thank God for that. I closed the door on his stunned face, locked it, and walked back to my living room. For the first time, I saw our home clearly, the carefully chosen art that reflected David's taste, not mine. The formal furniture selected for impression rather than comfort. The sterile perfection that had never felt truly lived in. None of it was really mine. None of it ever had been. The next day, I met Walter, not my biological father, but the only father I'd ever known, at a quiet coffee shop. He looked older than his 76 years, grief etching new lines around his eyes. Bethy, he said, taking my hands across the table. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to apologize for, I told him. You didn't know. I should have, he replied, his voice breaking. All those years, your mother's secrecy about certain things. The way she'd get defensive if I commented on how you didn't look like either of us. I suspected something, but I never pressed. I was a coward. No, I squeezed his hands. You were a father. My father. Biology doesn't change that. Tears filled his eyes. I've left your mother. Moved in with my brother for now. I can't look at her without seeing the decades of lies. I understand, I said softly. What will you do now? He shrugged, looking lost. I don't know. At my age, starting over seems impossible. It's never too late, I told him, thinking of my own new beginning at 52. You could travel. You always wanted to see Europe. A faint smile crossed his face. Maybe. Would you? Would you consider coming with me? Once all this legal business is settled? The offer touched me deeply. Despite everything, the bond between us remained. I'd like that, I said. Very much. 2 weeks after the party, Maggie called with an update on the legal proceedings. David's attorney is pushing for a quick, quiet settlement. They're offering to return the money from the equity line plus damages. And the criminal charges? He's negotiating a plea deal with the DA. Financial crimes, fraud, identity theft. He'll avoid jail time but lose his business license and pay substantial fines. And my mother? The trust fund? The trust has been frozen pending investigation. Your mother's claiming she was managing it in your best interest, but the documentation doesn't support that. She'll likely face civil penalties, possibly criminal charges for the drugging. I absorbed this information, feeling strangely detached. The justice system was working as it should, but the legal consequences seemed almost secondary now. The truth was out. That was what mattered most. What about Rebecca? I asked. Nothing criminal on her end, from what we can tell. She may not have known about the financial aspects, but she's named in the civil suit regarding the boutique. I nodded. Keep moving forward with everything. No settlements, no deals. I want the full process to play out. Are you sure? A settlement would be faster, cleaner. I'm sure. This was never about money. It was about truth. After hanging up, I wandered through the quiet house, mentally cataloging what I would take when I left: my books, my personal mementos, the few pieces of art I'd chosen myself. The rest could be sold, donated, discarded. The material trappings of my false life held no value anymore. I paused at the hallway mirror, studying my reflection. The woman looking back at me seemed different, stronger, clearer, more defined. The fog of doubt and self-recrimination had lifted, revealing the person I was meant to be all along. 3 months after the party, I moved into a small but sunlit apartment near the university. The divorce was proceeding, the legal machinery grinding forward at its deliberate pace. David had been formally charged with multiple financial crimes. My mother was fighting the trust fund investigation with expensive lawyers. Rebecca had indeed left town, reportedly moving to another state to start fresh. Walter and I spoke weekly, planning our European trip for the following spring. He was healing in his own way, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering interests my mother had deemed frivolous. At the library, I threw myself into a new digitization project preserving rare manuscripts for future generations. The work felt symbolic somehow, taking fragile, valuable things and ensuring their survival, their truth, their legacy. One evening, as I organized my new apartment, I found a small box of family photographs I'd brought from the house. Pictures of holidays, birthdays, vacations, moments that had seemed genuine at the time. I considered throwing them away, erasing that false narrative completely. Instead, I placed the box on a high shelf. Not to display, not to revisit regularly, but to preserve as evidence of a chapter closed. Those memories, however tainted, were part of my story. Acknowledging them didn't mean being defined by them. That night, I stood on my small balcony, watching the university campus in the distance, its lights glowing softly in the darkness. At 52, I was starting over. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. Drinks tomorrow? New wine bar on 4th. I smiled and replied, perfect. I'll be there. Then I went inside, closed the balcony door, and prepared for bed. No more pretending. No more shrinking to make others comfortable. No more begging for love that came with conditions. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need them to apologize. I just needed to be free. And now, finally, I was.